How about now? Am I back? Back. I don't understand why Restream is having such issues lately. It's very frustrating. I tried hard coding which server to use now, but that's very annoying. Let's see if YouTube comes back too. Before I continue. Is YouTube there? Hello, YouTube. YouTube is back too. Fantastic. I have no idea what's going on with the Restream. It's very frustrating. YouTube is back now too. Okay, let's see where I left off. So, yeah, I wrote a comment. What I wrote here, and this is sadly very common. Like, I maintain a lot of libraries at this point, and not all of them I'm actively using myself. And I unfortunately don't have the time to actively be doing feature development for all of them. I wish I did. And so what I wrote here is a fairly common sentiment is that, like, sorry for the silence. It's on the back burner. I would love for the starting experience to be better, though I have limited time at the moment to make that happen myself. But if anyone wants to take a stab at adding impl debug, standard examples, or maybe making the interface harder to get wrong, especially with regards to deadlock, then I would be happy to look at some PRs. Because in general, like, I know that for these libraries, it's probably untenable for someone to just like take it over. I would want them to submit some PRs where I can guide them through the implementation, guide them into how to make it better before I sort of give them the keys to the kingdom. So I do want to spend time on reviewing PRs, but actually implementing new features here is not something I end up with enough time for. Maybe one day if I end up doing this like full time, but even so, it's a lot better if people who are actively using this themselves are the maintainers. In this case, like, I'm not really using tracing timing myself very much anymore. Not because I don't like it, but because I was primarily using it for Noria, and I'm not really building a system like Noria at the moment. And so I just don't really need it. And so that's why I would love for people to contribute who are actively using the project. Tracing timing is also really cool. Like, it's both a cool it's a cool tool, but the implementation is also interesting. So if anyone is looking for something to like delve into that has some concurrency and stuff, then please have a look. Let's see. Oh, right. This is something that came up in the previous stream where there was someone filed an issue around differential flame graphs. So the ones that show how much slower or faster different stack frames got in a flame graph. And, you know, we commented on this in the previous stream. Oh man, they have COVID. That sucks. So let's see. Okay, so this one is currently a draft. And I wrote in there some... in the previous issue, they basically outlined an explanation of how they think we can make these differential flame graphs better. And, you know, we read through it last time. We're basically like, this seems like a good idea. The current thing is confusing. Absolutely fine with changing the way that this information is output. And so I guess they're going to... tracing timing is the one. And so I basically told them, go ahead, make this change. And I guess they already have a draft PR up. So we can take a brief look at it, but it sounds like they're going to sort of replenish that PR, if you will, once they get better. Let's see. Old and new. I wonder if these labels still make sense if negate differentials is on. So negate differentials is a way to treat old as new and new as old, kind of. And so they're implementing that functionality here, but I don't know if these labels are going to make sense if negate differentials is on. If x is equal to y, then don't output anything because it didn't change. So if not negate differentials, then it's new divided by old. So it's a multiplier. It is right. So if it now spends twice as many samples in a given stack frame than what it used to, it's going to say the ratio is going to be 2. So 2x compared to this is going to say 2x and then the old value. So it's going to say equals 2x and then the old value followed by the word old. I'm not sure I follow the phrasing here. This will look like if, for example, we spend as many samples in some frame, this will look like equals to x I don't know, 1, 2, 3 or 2, 5, 6 old, which I think is maybe overly concise. How about, so I think the idea here, Unicode X, oh, this is the compose key on Linux, which is fantastic. It lets you create all sorts of characters. So I can type like a Norwegian by writing O and then a slash. And the Unicode X is compose key XX. No, the old, oh, you're right. It's going to be old 256. Wait, actually, no, it's not going to be that either. It's going to be the count name. So it's going to be this, which I think it may be overly concise. This will look like, I think. Yeah, you're right. Compared to his old here. Overly concise. Well, so the question is also what it prints. The other thing that bothers me, it doesn't include the function name. It doesn't include the function name. Is that printed elsewhere? And the old or new sample counts. I think we'll want to include at least the function name and one of the two absolute numbers. I'm also not sure if old and new are understandable labels in this instance, especially for negate differentials. Maybe Um, because like 2x old cycles is like very dense. It's like twice as many cycles as what were there previously. I guess old cycles does kind of get at that, but how about they may even be unnecessary. I think actually be right? Like, I don't think the word old helps here. I think if you just say it's twice the number of cycles, like it's sort of implicit that it is compared to the old. So I'll just leave that as comments. Great. Hasmail. Oh, this project I've basically abandoned because I rewrote it in Rust. Hasmail is a little tray icon. It's just a tray icon application that checks whether you have new email. And if it does, it changes the tray icon and then triggers a notification. So it's really handy to just like, you know, if you don't want to run a full mail client, you're using Mutt or something, but you do want email notifications. That's what Hasmail gives you. But I've rewritten this in Rust and it's called Buzz. And so I would just recommend people use Buzz instead. I basically don't maintain the Go implementation of this anymore. The new implementation in Rust lives in, which should hopefully be easier to customize and understand. Close. I think I already have it in the README actually, that this is now just Buzz. No, apparently I do not. Let's do that right now. The Go implement this project has been rewritten in Rust and is now maintained under commit changes. Boom. I should arguably archive the repo too. Okay. Fontaccini. Can you automate the Gecko driver session initialization? I was working on a personal project which requires web scraping, so I looked into this library. Problem came to mind is that you need to have something Gecko driver already running, which I don't really know how to start programmatically. Can someone explain it to me? Oh, this is like, how do you run, like in order to orchestrate or manage a browser, you need to run this little daemon that implements the WebDriver protocol on one side and knows how to talk to the browser on the other. So in the Chrome world, this is a tool called Chrome Driver. For Firefox, it's called Gecko Driver. And this is basically someone asking like, how do I run that tool, which is not really something that Fontaccini deals with. As it should just be a matter of running the gecko driver command. Beyond that, running the WebDriver host is sort of outside the scope of this project. Close is not planned. Done. Okay, let's see where we're at. More things. This one we can close. All right, let's keep going. Bump Ouroboros from 0.15.5 to 0.16. Ouroboros is unsound. Ooh. Interesting. Ouroboros is this it's a library for implementing self-referential data structures in Rust. So specifically, imagine that you have a buffer or like a VEC-U8 that holds like data you read from the server. And then you want also in the same object that holds that VEC, you want to hold like the parsed representation of that VEC-U8. And so we do that a decent amount in the IMAP library because you can imagine that like if you fetch an email, then that email is mostly going to be like the VEC-U8 is mostly going to be the message of the email. And so in the parsed representation, we just want to keep a string reference that is really just pointing at a subset of the VEC-U8 rather than having to replicate that entire string and allocate it twice. So we use Ouroboros for that, but apparently it's unsound. And okay, so there's some fix in Ouroboros itself, and it passes all the tests. It's just rolling Ubuntu. The next question now is doesn't matter whether this is a backwards compatible change because IMAP is about to get a breaking change, a new major version anyway. This rolling release update is something. That's fine. That's been fixed elsewhere. Great. So this seems reasonable. Merge. It does really mean that I need to decide when we're going to cut the new breaking change of IMAP. Currently, it's released as like alphas. And the reason is because we still have a couple of outstanding changes that I know will be breaking. And so I don't want to release like IMAP 3.0 until we've done all of those, because otherwise I'm going to have to release an IMAP 4.0 not too long after. The problem is all of these are very volunteer based. So who knows when they'll land? It's a tricky balance. In 0.15, the fix has been implemented in 0.16. 265 is now merged. And according to the advisory, 0 to 16 does not have this issue anymore. So I think we're good. We will only be good for IMAP 3.0 when that eventually lands though, which is awkward. All right, let me see if I can backport it. I really, I don't even remember whether Ouroboros is used in 0.2 because that's fairly old by now. But if we look at something like fetch, yeah, I'm pretty sure we don't use Ouroboros in 0.2. So if I go to Cargo Toml and then dig up the version from, not from main, but from 241. Yeah, Ouroboros isn't in there. Great. I'll cut a new alpha soonish. If I forget, please ping me. Great. Close with comment. Unsoundness here means that basically there's undefined behavior in the library. And I think that changes in all versions of Ouroboros 0.15. I think it is mostly I think the reason that they didn't yank it is because it's not normally a security issue. Like, you have to be pretty intentional about triggering it. It's not something that like anyone who uses Ouroboros is now subject to huge problems. It's more like potential unsoundness from my skim of that advisory. Great. So this, I'll have to cut an IMAP alpha. That's fine. This is now done. That's now done. Beautiful. Bump OpenSSL from 0.1048 to 0.1055. Oh. Did not like that. This is in Fantoccini. Oh, we got this in multiple things. I guess this is because of some kind of security advisory, probably. I think the only reason it's there... Yeah, it's because of a security issue in OpenSSL. So that's why it's specifically cutting this, even though it's a minor release. This seems fine. It's not really a problem because IMAP as a library. So this is setting the minimum bound. This lock file doesn't apply to our consumers. So this bump isn't actually something that we need to absorb. It's not important. I don't need to do a new release because our consumers have their own lock files anyway. But I think the reason it triggers this for us is because I check in the lock file, even though it's a library. So this is fine to merge, but it's not important. Arguably, we should bump the lock file, but not the cargo toml in this case. But it's fine. It doesn't bump an MSRV or anything, so I'm okay with it. Here, it breaks a bunch of things. Why? If we do @dependabot rebase, see if it can come up with a better change. +1 from dependabot. Great. Let's go to the next one in the meantime. Automatically cleaning up .ssh connection on connection failure. Okay, so this is in OpenSSH. The way that OpenSSH works is it spins up this OpenSSH muxing client that does connection negotiation so that we don't have to implement the OpenSSH protocol. And the way that we talk to that sort of local OpenSSH client, muxing client, is through a Unix domain socket. That Unix domain socket is a file that's created in a temporary directory that we construct called .ssh connection with a bunch of random letters at the end to make it unique. And currently, I guess the observation is that if connecting fails, then we don't delete this directory afterwards. So the user ends up with like a bunch of crufty directories if they fail. Oh, and they have panic equals abort set. So we don't get to run destructors. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Great. Thank you. Someone else already responded and closed the ticket. This is why it's great to have other maintainers on projects. Is this now rebased? Yeah, now it's running all the tests. Why does checking on nightly not work? Unknown feature. Proc macro span shrink. That's disturbing. That's very disturbing. I wonder why this is such broken. It's just an OpenSSL bump. Like, why is this causing a strife? It's also only there for minimal versions. Like, it's not This doesn't change anything. I guess we'll see. Okay, Rust CI conf. So this is a library that I built. It's not even a library. It is a collection of GitHub Actions CI configuration files that I use to configure the CI on all the Rust projects that I own. So it has, like, if we go look at the repo, I did a stream on this one actually. It's just a .github. It has some configuration for CodeCov and for Dependabot. And then it has these different GitHub Actions workflows that will run your test suite with all the different features enabled, will run, check that your minimal supported Rust version is correct, run Miri, run Loom, whatever. It's just, I use this as the default. And there's a lot of technical detail that went into creating the CI configuration, and you noted that it wasn't documented particularly well in the YouTube video covering it. I've added my understanding of what you wrote, as well as some basic instructions how to incorporate this into an existing repo. I took the approach... Oh, so this is basically adding documentation to this repo so that people understand what they're merging in. Yeah... That's nice. And then someone left a review. That's fine. Great. Love other people cooperating. All right, let's look at this one. .github/docs.md. In this folder, there's a configuration for code coverage, Dependabot, and CI workflows. Checks the library more deeply than the default configurations. This folder can be merged using a allow unrelated histories merge strategy from this, which provides a reasonably sensible case for writing your own CI on. By using this strategy, the history of the CI repos included in your repo, and future updates to the CI can be merged later. To perform this merge, run that, fetch CI merge, allow unrelated history CI merge. Yep, that's fine. And this will also work even if you do another merge later, then that flag is just unnecessary. That's fine. As consumers of this library would build with their own lock file rather than the version specified in this library's lock file. Yep, that's why we don't do patch updates. Even though Dependabot still triggers patch updates for dependencies like we saw with OpenSSL, but I think it only does it in the case of security advisories. Okay, so we looked at this file, we looked at that file, we looked at that file. This configuration allows maintainers of this repo to create a branch and pull requests based on the new branch, restricting the push trigger to the main branch ensures that the PR only gets built once. Yep. Yeah, so this restriction in the CI file, if I didn't have this, then if I create a branch of my own project and then push to that branch in order to open a PR, all of CI runs twice. Once for there's a branch of the repo and once for there's a PR. And so this ensures that only the main branch gets its PR, gets a CI run. New code is pushed to PR branch, then cancel in progress workflows for that PR. Ensures that we don't waste CI time and return results quicker. So this is, if I post a PR and then while some CI jobs are still running, I push a new commit to that PR, then the existing PR CI run will be canceled. Like any in-progress task will be canceled, no new ones will be run, and then it will only be run for the new commit instead. Get early warning of new lints, which are regularly introduced in some beta channels. Yep. Doc generation on nightly to get doc config. Yep. Combinations of feature flags. Feature power set runs for every combination of features. That's right. Determine the minimal Rust version that's supported by this crate. This is not quite right. This isn't quite right. This doesn't determine the MSRV. It checks whether the configured MSRV can indeed still build the current crate. So it's a it'll warn you if you accidentally bump the MSRV, but it will not find the MSRV in such a case. Great. This workflow, this is a no stud, checks whether the library is able to run without the stud library. This entire file should be removed if the crate does not suppose no stud. Maybe also add a line here saying that like some of this repetition is unfortunate. Maybe also add a line here and in the other non-check files saying that all the shared configuration lines, like on push, are documented in check.yml, and then remove the repeated comments, like if new code is pushed, from all the other files. Unbalanced brackets in the review. Did I? Where? I don't see unbalanced brackets. Great. This workflow checks for unsafe code. In crates that don't have any unsafe code, this can be removed. Runs Miri, address sanitizer, leak sanitizer, and Loom. Yep. When scheduled rolling jobs on a nightly basis, your crate might break independently of any given PR. Updates to Rust nightly and updates this crate's dependencies. That's fine. Section checks the updating the dependency of this crate to the latest available to satisfy the version of Cargo TOML does not break this crate. This is important as consumers of this crate will generally use the latest available crates. Subject to the constraints in our cargo.toml. i.e., they will not update to 2.0 if we specify 1.3 in the other non-check files. Really? Did I? Oh, yeah, you're right. I completely read past that. Good catch. Okay. This file is missing top level documentation. And so is check, actually. This file is missing top level documentation. Chat is helping, it's true. Enable this CI template to run regardless whether the lock file is checked in or not. Yep. This action chooses the oldest version of the dependencies to ensure that this crate is compatible with the minimal versions that this crate and its dependencies require. This will pick up issues where this crate relies on functionality that was introduced later than the actual version specified. For example, when we choose just a major version, but a method was added after this version. Init EG and IER should always be followed by a comma. Should basically always be followed by a comma, according to most style guides. I think here I want oldest version of dependencies permitted by cargo.toml. because it's not the oldest version. Like that would be like 0.0.1. It's the oldest version that's permitted by the semantic versioning requirements we have in Cargo TOML. Yeah, so for EG and IE, there are 3 ways. There's EG, not followed by a comma or optionally followed by a comma. So there's this one by a regex, and this is only recommended by the Economist style guide and no others. Then there's EG with a comma, which is most I think this is most British style guides. And then this EG without a space, which is most American style guides. I may have gotten American and British mixed up here. But with comma is common in both, and without is only common in one. So the general consensus is there should be a comma. There's a really interesting discussion on the Stack Overflow for English. Stack English, comma, after IE. It's this one, I think. And there's a long discussion in... no, it's not that one. It is from... Sometimes DuckDuckGo is not very good at finding things. But maybe it is that one. It's from... In American English, comma after IE. Not in British. Ah, it's this one. That's the one I was after. And then this article, which talks at length about this. And about, you know, whether there should be dots in between them, whether there should be commas after. And the general recommendation is you should basically always use a comma after. Anyway, this is neither here nor there. This particular check can be difficult to get to succeed, as often transitive dependencies may be incorrectly specified. For example, a dependency specifies 1.0, but really requires 1.15. There's an alternative flag available that uses the minimal version for dependencies to create while selecting the maximal versions. Alternatively, you can add a line in your... I forget where I already did this. I did this in... It might have been an IMAP. Oh, we already did this. No. Oh, maybe it's actually in this one. Yeah. So this is the other way to sort of make minimal versions be happy, is you specify an optional dependency where you give the minimal, and then you place it behind target config any, which is never true. So that way it affects your generation of your lock file, but you never actually take the dependency. So we will add that in there in your cargo.toml to artificially increase the minimal dependency, which you do with toml. See also. And I think I want to recommend that people do this. Needed to allow foo to build with minimal versions. the optional equals true is necessary in case that dependency isn't otherwise required by your library. That dependency isn't otherwise transitively required by your library, and the target bit. Let me see if I can actually dig up the history for that line. Someone added that fairly recently, I thought. I don't remember why I have config any there. And the target bit is so that this dependency edge is never actually never actually affects cargo build order, I think is why. So normally if there's a direct edge between two crates, then cargo is always going to make sure it builds one before the other. But in this case, we basically want to, or it has to like, it knows that this crate, let me see if I can dig this up right. It thinks there's a direct dependency between this crate and that crate, when in reality that might not be true for minimal versions. We might specify this just because some transitive dependency we needed to lift the floor of, but we don't want cargo to think that there's a direct build edge because it might make it not do optimizations for build order it might otherwise do. So we'll add that in there. Run cargo test on macOS and Windows. Use LVM come to build and collect coverage. That's fine. Okay, viewed and viewed. This is great. Thanks for taking the time. Left a few notes in line. Request changes. Submit review. Done. What's the Z prefix in a flag means? It's the way that cargo expresses flags that are nightly only. Experimental, unstable flags. All right. How did this OpenSSL PR go? Does it still fail? It still fails so many things. I don't quite understand why. Oh, this is because Wikipedia has changed. Okay. It's very annoying, actually. There's a bunch of tests in Fantoccini that basically queries Wikipedia to check that we can actually interface with a real website. But when Wikipedia changes, finds all inner, then the test starts failing, which is really stupid. Like, I should make this not be as dumb. So on line 170, so that's here. The thing on the left, that's fine. Minor git clone Fantoccini. Yeah, I know it's a terrible. So we've started getting better at this. So if you see here, there's a local.rs test suite for Fantoccini, which is all based on local files. And then there's remote, which is all based on Wikipedia. It used to be that all the tests were based on Wikipedia, and it was a huge pain. Now most of them are local. If you want to do something that's fairly simple work, then please, please, please take the remote tests from Fantoccini and port them to be local tests instead, so that this problem goes away. It should not be very hard, and it's a great way to just do a PR to Fantoccini that matters. But for now, I'm going to fix this by replacing these with that. And then I'm guessing this other one also fails sub-element. And so that's going to be the same thing where... Whoa, why is that there? That's a weird annotation. So this too. Oops, that's not what I wanted. That's the only one that, those are the only two that failed, right? It finds sub, it finds all for Firefox and for Chrome. Great. It changed again. Wikipedia changed. Change again. Someone please turn this test local. Okay. This is one of those where I might as well do the fix myself because this particular fix, because I know how to do it. And so I'll do this as a PR just to see that CI actually passes, and then I can land this, and then I can rerun CI for I can rebase this Dependabot, and then everything should be good. Okay. This is for the errata for Phosphorus in chapter 8, listing 14, sum to OK. Return value is result. I think we need to use OK because I use sum t and question mark operator in destructuring assignment. What's changed? Let's see. Listing 8.14 says this thing. Server this thing. So the change is from sum here to OK when you call socket accept. I mean, it depends on what library you're using for async too, but TCP listener calls accept dot await. Yeah, I mean, this one's tricky because the idea here was that you want to handle, or the reason I wrote it this way, because in some ideal world, when you call accept, you get back a result of option where the error is something went wrong, and the none means there are no more streams, like the socket is closed, which isn't really an error in the same way. So this should only be while let OK if you want to ignore the errors. And if you don't want to ignore the errors, then this doesn't need to be this can just be a while let stream equals. There's no need for the OK here because the question mark already unwraps. Where did I go here? So, so this kind of depends on which asynchrony library you're using for TCP listener. But yes, in general, accept will return just a result TCP stream, not result option TCP stream, even though I think the latter makes more sense. When that is the case, I would argue you should still use, when that is the case, you would either need to write while let OK stream equals socket dot accept dot await, or while let stream equal socket dot await question mark. I think the latter is actually better because it won't silently drop errors on the ground. and when exiting. But it's also a little bit of a weird pattern. It's an infallible match. I don't really know what the book should recommend here, because like it's not talking about any specific implementation of a library. So it could easily just be talking about a sort of broadly an accept that returns the result option. I wonder what accept in the standard library does. TCP listener accept. It also returns a result over TCP stream. Yeah. Which makes me a little sad. Like for many parts of the book, one thing I worry about is giving code and then people getting tripped up by something that isn't relevant to the thing that I want to talk about. Yeah, you can also have a loop that just does this inside. So we could do, or at that point, it could even just be loop let stream equals socket.accept.await. Like one thing I worry about with the book and when writing in general is like people getting tripped up by some pattern that looks weird that's not really related to the thing that I'm trying to explain. Like in this case, I think what I'm trying to talk about is the sort of structure of how to handle multiple clients concurrently. So I start with this as the example, then I expand it to be like, what if you now join on the clients? What if you spawn the clients, to talk about things that happen concurrently or things that happen in parallel? And I worry that gets lost a little bit once this becomes a strange looking pattern like this one, or where the structure sort of changes like this one. And I like the advantage of the way that this was written is that people don't really question it. Like it's true that it doesn't work if you're using Tokio, or even indeed if you pretended that the standard library was async and you just use the standard library, because they don't differentiate between getting an error from accept and having accept telling you there are no more connections coming, which to me are different conditions. So this is a sort of trade-off between technical accuracy and what is more helpful. There are a bunch of things that are technically incorrect about this, right? Like for example, what you actually get back from an accept is you get a tuple of TCP stream and socket address. But that's not something that I handle here. Technically also, you would need to put an empty OK line here because otherwise this wouldn't type check. But those things aren't important, so they're not in here. However, I think the weirdness of that setup is that code layout might trip people up even more. The code is already somewhat inaccurate compared to what you'd have to do in the real world, because it, or e.g., accept returns a tuple, not just a stream, and the function would need a trailing to type check. And I think the less distracting thing is actually to keep it the way it is, where the reader can imagine a reasonable API that matches. Yeah, so another option would be to give accept the signature that I prefer. But the thing is, this entire chapter, there's no definition of accept. Like I don't in the book give a definition of accept because I don't really want to talk about accept. Like accept isn't important to the thing that I'm describing. I just assume that people roughly know what accepting a connection means in TCP. This isn't about TCP. And so that signature is never given. It's always inferred by the reader. And that's sort of what I'm getting at here, right? Like to keep it the way it is, where the reader can imagine / infer a reasonable API that matches the code. So I'm going to close this. Okay, how did this go? Whoa, this did not go how it should. That's interesting. Well, whoa. Why did it not work? It clicks did not work because, ooh, I got a 503 from Wikipedia. Service temporarily unavailable. That's interesting and not what I would have hoped. I'm guessing this one might be the same. No, this is something else. That's like the rolling test that's failing. Why is this failing? It clicks by locator also failed. Okay, so it suggests that it clicks by locator is maybe broken. Gecko driver. Firefox, what's it called? It clicks by locator. This is because I don't have normal Firefox installed. I only have the Firefox Developer Edition. That's fine. This is all normal Firefox as well. How about now? Open me a browser, please. That passes. So this is a transient error then. That's fine. Maybe I get rate limited by Wikipedia. Wouldn't be entirely unreasonable. The errors are transient Wikipedia 503s, so we're good. Comment. Merge with administrator privileges. Merge. Delete this branch. And then Dependabot rebase again, please. So Dependabot is going to rebase, and hopefully that's going to make things work. Okay. Another PR to Inferno from Dependabot. Bumping index map. That's fine. That's a private dependency. We don't have that in the public API as far as I remember. And yeah, that's fine. This is just used internally. I'm curious now though, what changed in index map 2? Do they have a changelog in here? They do not. Do they have one on the repo? It's not a changelog on the repo. Releases. MSRV, std feature is no longer auto-detected. SRD1 has been removed. Get mute now returns that. That would be caught at compile time. Index map now have additional things. Reserve exact. Equivalent is re-exported. Hashbrand was updated in the sort of seek. Okay, so these are all none breaking for us. Oops. Did I accidentally close that? Yeah, I did. Okay, this seems fine. Thank you, Dependabot. I don't think I care. Yeah, I don't. This is a fine change to just do. It's out of date with fine. All right, Dependabot rebase. This one's going to keep running. Shell Escape is being overzealous. Bug in OpenSSH. Trying to do a curl and notice that the arg would fail. Turns out Shell Escape is adding a few more single than double quotes. Try something like this and review the data structure. I think you need to use a different crate as Shell Escape hasn't been updated in years. Why are they quoting themselves in here? That is the intended way. Every argument has to be passed separately. Is same as process and Tokyo process. Yeah, that's right. Great. Nothing for me to do. Done. Very exciting. How about asking the guys at the Internet Archive if you can use a corner of their page for tests? That's not a bad idea. Wikipedia is arguably a bad target because it keeps changing. There was a period where Wikipedia changed their whole design, and that was a nightmare. But I really want these tests to just use local files instead. I think if we're going to change them, we should change them to use local files because there's no reason for them to be used in external resource at all. It just makes them more annoying to run. It means you can't run them if you're like on a plane or something, which there's nothing preventing you from doing so. So I would rather just fix them properly. Okay. What are we down to? 105. So we were at what, 135. So we're down 30. This is pretty good. Okay. Bump Russell's connector in IMAP. That's fine because this is going to be a I don't understand why CI hasn't run for this. That's interesting. Network request interception, unfortunately, isn't part of the WebDriver spec, and so at least not yet. So it's not something Fantocchini will support as things currently stand. This is like the ability to look at which requests the browser is making, essentially like the developer tools networking tab. But that's not something Fantocchini does. This has been closed because it's been superseded. That's easy. This has been closed because it's been superseded. Great. Let's work for me. Rust CI conf. The matrix for MSRV needs quoted semver or it will truncate. Put 170 in there and it will actually test 1.7 as it appears GitHub auto converts this to a float. That's wild. That's awful. That's absolutely terrifying and awful. Thanks for catching it. So if you put 1.70 here, it will treat it as a float, and 1.70 is the same as 1.7, and so therefore it's using 1.7. That's terrible and gross. Squash and merge. Quote MSRV version to avoid float parsing. Confirm squash and merge. That's disgusting, GitHub. But I understand this is not their fault. Feature request Rust support. This is in some, I don't even know why I'm following this ticket. There's a feature request for AWS code build Docker images. Unsubscribe. And done. Bump Svelta. This is where we were wondering. That seems fine. I don't really care. 358 to 359. What could possibly have changed? Squash and merge. Here, I do need to manually do a release of this to the website. There's no automation that pushes it out to like the S3 bucket that hosts the interface. It would be nice to set that up. Maybe I'll do it one day. But for now, this is going to have to be manual. Bump Russell's connector. I don't really know what to do to trigger this one. Like, this seems fully reasonable. I just don't know how to... Russell's connector. Also, this should probably be 0.18.0. So here's what I'm going to do. This is going to re-trigger CI, so I guess that's nice. Add comment. And then I'll do the same here to propose here that this should be 0. Because when you increase the effective major version, then you assume that you can start at patch version 0 and then commit the suggestion. And now let's see if that kicks off CI. Yeah, something is queued. Great. This is an issue I filed against the TOML crate ages ago, where if you parse TOML using the TOML crate, then the thing you get back lets you deal with things like an array, and the TOML crate has its own definition for array, so that it keeps track of like inline comments and stuff. So if you print it back out, the TOML you print back out includes any comments that were in the stuff that you brought in. So it's not just a vector, it's actually a separate type. But this means that because it's a separate type, it's not like a vector, you don't have access to common collection methods like retain, which is really, really handy to have. And so this is basically just asking, can we add retain as a feature of array and the table likes? That's great. I did it for the wrong crate. Ooh. I love it when other people do things that I want to happen. Great, so this adds retain. Which is calls retain on the underlying value, which is what I would expect the implementation to look like. Beautiful. That's fantastic. I don't remember what I wanted this for. I think it was maybe some stuff I was doing at Amazon. I don't think I'm using the TOML crate in any of my personal projects. Well, I'm glad this happened. Great, done. All right, bump OpenSSL and Fantoccini now looks like it's passing tests. The rolling Ubuntu one is failing because that's still, I don't understand where this comes from. This is like it runs cargo update and then tries to build, and apparently that doesn't work, which is a little disturbing. Bump index map with the rebase, that's still working. This is probably that same issue actually. Yeah, so I think there's something wrong in proc macro. It might be that I have to switch the dependency to be like 2.0 instead of 1.0, given that syn and quote both got bumped, and that the 1.0s don't actually work anymore with newer versions of Rust. It's almost certainly what's going on there, which means I probably have a Dependabot PR further up in the queue that's like bumping syn and quote. But we can ignore those errors then in here. But let's have CI keep running there. This CI is running, so now we're just waiting on a bunch of CI. This is the downside of using the open source funded CI jobs, is it limits how many jobs will run concurrently, which is very understandable. But when you're doing batch work like this, CI, like you'll see a bunch of these jobs haven't started yet. Well, now they've all started, so my argument doesn't hold anymore. But it only runs a few of them at a time across all your projects. And so you just need to wait and sit patiently. libflate and rustzip. Okay, is another dependabot. Libflate and Inferno. So this is also internal only. This just deals with how we compress representations of SVGs or something. Let me see here. Oh, it's only in dev dependencies even. I think this is because we allow you to pass in a compressed flame graph. Or maybe we use compressed flame graphs for tests. So yeah, this doesn't matter for anything. It's in dev dependency. Seems fine. What's this? Check nightly doc. That's that same thing. That's fine. And we'll do a dependabot rebase for this to make sure I didn't do anything wrong. And so now we're going to have to wait for CI. This one I think I'm happy enough with that I'm just going to merge this. Confirm. Which also means dependabot is going to have to rebase again. Because this is to the same repo, so this one's done. This fails on macOS latest. Because, yeah, this cookie test is broken for some reason. This is a spurious test failure that I haven't figured out yet. But all the reasonable ones are landing, so I'm just going to merge this so we don't have to wait for it. Those failures are not due to this bump, is basically the observation. Russell's connector, all the CI here seems to be running fine except for beta. And that's deprecated functions in Chrono. That's fine. We can merge this. And libflate, that's now going to rerun. Fantastic. Okay. Fix bias towards the first element due to floor. Okay, so this is in the Zipf crate. So Zipf is a when you generate random numbers, normally what you want with a random number generator is to generate uniformly random numbers. So the probability of sampling any given number in the range is equal across the range. So the probability, if you generate numbers between 1 and 10, it is equally likely that you generate a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, etc. Zipf is a different kind of distribution. So rather than being a uniform distribution, it is a skewed distribution. So the likelihood of getting a 1 is much higher than the likelihood of getting a 10. And it's sort of an exponential curve kind of. I think technically it's called log normal. It's not exponential. So the elements further to the left in the sampling range are much more likely than the next element to the right of it, and so on. So you get this like gradation. And one of the reasons you might want to use Zipf is if you're running benchmarks, for example, and you want to emulate that you have a skewed distribution. So for example, the thing I used this for was emulating the number of votes on an article. This is for like the Noria work. So imagine that you're running a benchmark and you're generating a bunch of articles, something like Hacker News, like generating a bunch of articles and you're generating votes on those articles. Then it's not as though all articles get roughly the same number of votes. In reality, some articles get way more votes than others. And so you can use something like Zipf to generate that distribution of votes. So when you are about to generate a vote, the way that you choose which article is you generate the article ID to vote for using Zipf. And the Zipf library here is a port of a very fast implementation of how to generate these skewed numbers. There are some very slow ways of doing it, but there's a Java library that does very fast implementation of this distribution. And so this is a port of that to Rust. This PR addresses a correctness issue where the generator favors the first element more than it should and emits the last element less than it should for a given exponent. This is due to the implicit use of floor, which makes emitting the last element only possible by an exact match. We did thus shift the likelihoods from the first element, which was favored, to the last by adding 0.5 before doing the floor, as the original code also does. Oh, nice. Someone's porting it to Julia. Nice. So the original implementation here and the port here. So this is the original Java code. It has a loop. It does the integral inverse. It takes the x it gets back, adds 0.5 and takes the floor. And then it takes if k is less than 1, then k is 1, which is the same thing we get by doing a max here. But I think this can use a round. I think there's a round operation for F64. Round the nearest integer to self. It's halfway between two integers, round away from 0.0. So I wonder whether instead of adding 0.5, we should round. Although I guess that's really... I wish actually that a round returned a usize, like an integer type instead of an F64, because otherwise casting from the F64 to an integer is not, I don't think, guaranteed to give the right integer. But the reason I would like to use the round is it might be faster than doing this add 0.5 and then cast. But that seems fine. Whoa, why did this change? Why did this change? Has this code like changed recently? No, it changed 7 years ago. Oh, this is in a test. Yeah, this is in a test. Right. So what this is doing is this test just generates a bunch of random numbers using the zip distribution and then checks that the frequency matches what you would expect to see after generating a zip distribution. And it does that by seeing whether how much we're off by compared to what we would expect the frequency of each bucket in the distribution to be is less than some like I don't know, like wiggle room or a jitter that we're allowing. And this used to have a special case for handling the first and last because those were more wrong, but that was because of that bug, which is now fixed. Beautiful. All right. This seems great. Although, why doesn't this have CI? March 11. Because it should have CI. That's interesting. CI just did not run for this. Workflow run completed with no jobs. What? I don't understand. Why not? me see. Is their source revision somehow not contain the workflows? No, it has the workflows. So why didn't any of them run? All right, let me make some change here then. I guess I'll just something arbitrary. Rounds towards 0. So we add to ensure great. And then commit suggestion. Really just to poke CI. Great. Will that trigger CI? That triggers CI. Great. No idea why CI didn't trigger otherwise. Let's see, that's going to run in the background. This is the bump of libflate and Inferno, and that looks fine. Merge, squash and merge, commit. Finished, close. I would be very surprised if this if this fix was not correct. But it's just good to have CI be green anyway. All right. Oh, we're down to 94. Look at us go. Let's see. I'm just waiting for this to run. Java can be fast. Yeah, of course it can. If you have a fast algorithm, then it'll be faster than the slow algorithm. Oh, round can't return an int because some floats are too big. That makes sense. This is setting on GitHub to require approval before CI runs. Maybe that's on. No, because then it usually shows me a button to say like approve and run, and it didn't do that here. Let me go ahead then and do Rust zip. This is almost certainly going to be fine. And then I'll do a release of zip straight away because that one's pretty easy to release. All right, another page. This I'm pretty sure I've already dealt with. Yeah, this is like a regression in tracing. That was backwards incompatible. That's fine. I can get rid of that. This passed. Merge. No. Squash. Because I don't care about my additional little commit. And then we'll do git pull. And then we'll do cargo toml release 701. Why can't I run cargo check? That's disturbing. Found crate config if compiled by an incompatible version of Rust C. It's almost certainly because that folder is out of date. There we go. Great. So release 701 with bias fix. And tag. So this is a script I have that just walks the Git history and finds which commit was the one where I changed the version in cargo toml and then add a tag to it. And git push and cargo publish. There we go. And zip0701 is tagged and released. Released in 7.0.1. Oh, I forgot to actually leave a review on this one. That's a great catch. Thank you. Beautiful. Okay. More. We're making very good progress through this. Support hot and cold flame graphs. I've not actually used these before, but they are supposedly very useful. Oh yeah, this is for also plotting off CPU time. So time spent waiting. So normally flame graphs do sampling. So they only sample what the CPU is actually running. So if your process is like asleep, like if it's waiting and accept, it's not going to be sampled. It's not going to show up as where you spent your time. And that can be a little misleading because it can make you think that your code is like spending all of its time in function A, when in reality it's actually spending most of its time asleep in function B. And hot-cold graphs will show those waiting parts in blue. Great idea. I think this is mostly a matter of how the input is collected and then just figuring out which frames to code to use red-ish, blue-ish for, depending on the on something in the output of perf script. Would be really neat indeed. Done. This is a feature to We Were Wondering. This is the Q&A site. This PR introduces step 2 over from here. Right. So this is when I built We Were Wondering, I was definitely relatively new to front-end development, which I still is, and new to the sort of framework I was using. And it turned out there were a couple of architectural decisions that should be changed somewhat for the system to just work better. And this person came along and basically implemented a bunch of things to make it better, like debouncing and stuff, so that animations would be nicer. But that particular PR was very large, and so I asked them, can you split this up into smaller PRs? And this is one of them. So this is moving, what's event here? Oh, event is information about the current Q&A session. So We Were Wondering supports, like, you can go create an event on We Were Wondering. I can go create one, and they end up with separate, like, unique identifiers. And those are separate events, and each event has associated questions. And I think a title, I forget exactly, but mostly, like, it has a separate, like, admin key, and it has a separate list of questions. And previously, which event was currently open, like which event the current page is on, was stored in a sort of local variable in Svelte here. And the observation is that it would actually be better to make event be in the store, which is a special type of object that Svelte has that's like persisted across page reloads, I think. And it also lets you be reactive with regards to if that variable changes somewhere in the code, then some other code, any code that has read that variable gets automatically run. So that's the reactive part of it, which you don't get with normal variables in the same way, I think. Event. Right. And we end up with in the previous style, sometimes when you change this variable, it ends up like loading things twice because it doesn't realize that it changed to be the same value. So here we're going to subscribe to the event, load questions for that event. Okay. This all seems like fairly straightforward changes. Writable null. Okay. This all seems reasonable to me. This seems entirely reasonable to me. Thanks for it back up. Also, didn't they say something about they were moving? And hope your move went well. Did you have a chance to also test this out yourself? I assume that means it worked without any meaningful changes to the behavior of the page. Just so I don't merge it if they didn't test it, because then I need to test it myself. The reason I use then catch in this code is because Svelte didn't basically required it, I think, because you couldn't have a block in the outer scope of a JavaScript file. That might have changed, but it was by necessity. Like I have other code in there that's async await style. Okay, so that was this one. Immutable iterator plus iterate with tokens. What is this? This is in stream unordered. Okay. This is a different crate again. Stream unordered implements a stream that multiplexes multiple streams. So the idea is that you have, similar to how you have a, join for futures, or this is really more like futures unordered. So there's a Tokyo, no, not Tokyo. Futures util. The futures util crate has this thing under stream called futures unordered. So a futures unordered is a set of futures, and the futures unordered itself is a stream. So you stick a bunch of futures in there, and it gives you a stream of the values that those futures resolved into in arbitrary order. So if you push the futures in A, B, and C, the things you get out of the futures unordered is going to be the future values the moment any of them respond in that order. So if B resolves first, the first thing the stream is going to yield is the value from B. If C then resolves, then the next thing the stream will yield is the value from C's future, and then A when A resolves. There's also futures ordered, which preserves the order. But what that means is, imagine that you stick in futures A, B, C, and D, and they resolve in the order D, C, B, A. Then futures ordered still has to wait. It has to buffer the responses from D and C and B. It has to keep them in like a vector basically until A resolves. And only when A resolves can it release them in the order A, B, C, D. So futures unordered, if you can tolerate the change of ordering, tends to be more efficient because it doesn't have to buffer anything. Now, stream unordered is a similar kind of abstraction, except the thing that you stick in there are streams and not futures. So it basically multiplexes these streams together so that you get one stream that logically combines or joins or merges multiple asynchronous streams under it. I haven't looked at this crate in a long time, but that's mostly because the stream API has stayed fairly static. So there hasn't really been a need to change this. Great. Immutable iterator plus iterator with token exposes the existing iter and iter pin ref via the methods iter and iter pin. Changes iter and iter pin's item to return usize and that, the usize being the token of the stream. Changing the item type of an existing type would be a breaking change. As far as I can tell, these types are incapable of being constructed as the fields are private and no other methods I could see returned and constructed. Hence, this change shouldn't be breaking. I attempted an implementation for stream unordered iter pin, but it's way out of my depth, so the PR is missing its implementation. Okay. Working on a project that queues many streams into stream unordered that are related to a single connection. When this connection is closed, I need to be able to clear all active streams. It would be useful if something like this following is possible. Stream unordered, push some streams, remove all streams. Streams in iter map token. Streams to remove ID. Token in a similar fashion with immutable iterators. Let's pull up the docs here. Stream unordered. So when you push a stream, or when you insert a stream, you get back a usize, which is like the token for that stream. And it's sort of a unique identifier for that stream, so that in the future, when the stream yields an item, let me see here, stream. When it yields an item, then it also tells you which stream yielded that item. The idea being that even though all the streams have the same value type or item type, you might actually care which of the underlying streams it came from. And this usize is that identifier. And you can also use that to like remove a particular stream from the set, for example. So the question now becomes, why do they want this? So there's an iter, so this is 4. Right, so there's an iter mute, and iter mute here allows you to iterate over all of the streams in the set, like all the currently known streams. So iter mute here, you'll see has, oh, interesting. Yeah, it's just a mutable iterator over all of the streams. But this iterator doesn't include the token. And I think that's what they're after. They want the iterator to also yield the token of the stream, which is really a bummer that iter mute doesn't do. So let's look at what they added here. Iterator for iter pin ref. All yeah, this is fine, although I don't know if it's okay to hold on to this reference after you do this operation. So we might have to read the ID up here, but that's fine. This is iter pin ref is sort of the underlying type, I believe. I don't think it's exposed in the, yeah, it's not exposed in the public API. It's just like a helper for implementing iterators. This should really not add an unpin bound. Yeah, that's not going to fly. Iter returns an iter. Oh, I see. So we had an iter type. It was just not exposed. Oh, this seagull is going nuts outside my window. Yeah, I don't think this should require unpin. Why does this require unpin? Iter mute requires unpin. Oh, because you're taking a mutable reference to self. So I'm not going to go in deeply into pin here, but basically the moment you stick something into a pin, or let me rephrase, you have to stick things in a pin before you're allowed to pull them as a future or as a stream. Once you put something into a pin, you're not allowed to expose it without the pin wrapper, mutably. And so here, you know, we've already pulled things as a stream because that's what this whole data structure does, but we're giving out mutable references to the streams. And we can only do that if the underlying type is unpinned. That is, if it's allowed to be extracted from within a pin after we've put it in a pin the first time. So you see that bound does not exist for iter pin mute. So that's fine. So iter, I don't think iter actually technically needs this bound because it doesn't expose mutable references. But I think it's okay. We could always relax this later if we can find a way to do it. I don't think iter pin is important to expose. But I don't know why this should suddenly require unpin. That doesn't seem right. The other thing that's awkward is that I wish it's going to be confusing that iter mute here. Where is my here? Source iter iterator for. Yeah, this also only returns a reference to S. But they changed that here, but only for iter. I think it's going to be confusing that iter mute does not include the token, but iter does. I think we need to be consistent here. And I think the way we do this is, I think we should just not expose this right now, unless we have a concrete use case that benefits from the pinning in that case. These seagulls are really just going for it out here. I don't think this extra bound should be necessary. I'm not 100% sure that it's safe for us to still access task here. So let's instead read task.id, read instead have let id is self.task .id directly next to Let's stream further up and then just use ID directly here. I think it'll probably be pretty confusing for iter to include a token, but iter mute not to. Let's instead add this as iter with token and add a iter mute with token as the mute version. Then in the next major version, we can get rid of the non-token iterators and just have them all provide tokens instead. Yeah. Great. Done. Add support for fluid drawing. It's from 2019. Oh. Someone left a comment. This landed in 2019, and then someone left a comment last month. It's really expensive to render for complex graphs. Oh, that makes sense. So this change was basically moving from having pixel-based widths for all the frames in flame graphs to using percentage widths instead. Now, percentage widths means we don't have to compute a bunch of things ourselves, but it means the browser has to compute those things instead, which is what this observation is, that this is now actually a lot more costly to render. Like it went from, what, 200 milliseconds to almost 3 seconds of layout calculation. Zoom is also a bit slower. With 40 to 60% of the time spent in update text. Yeah, so we switched to monospace fonts here, which made that a lot better. Let's check with the monospace font. Yeah, there's definitely a cost involved with having the browser do this work. I think there's a decent argument for us just making monospace fonts the default. So with monospace fonts, this update text method, which has to walk all of the text elements to like truncate them so that the text fits and doesn't overflow. With monospace fonts, we can pre-compute how many characters to show, and we know that that's just always how many we're going to show. But monospace fonts are not the default because they don't read as nice. What do you think? Done. This one's already released. It's going to be closed. This could be closed. Non-numlocked numpad keys cannot be. This is an issue I filed with OBS, where you can't put, like, on numpads, you know how you can have numlock on and off? If you have numlock off, then like the 7 key on a numpad, for example, is home, or the 0 key is like insert. You can't bind specifically the numpad insert key or the numpad home key to things in OBS. The home key on the numpad is treated the same as the home key on your normal keyboard. But I really want to be able to bind things to specifically the numpad keys. And so this is basically someone pointed out how you can do this, like how you can implement this distinction in OBS. And this is just, I need to write a PR, or if someone else wants to write a PR, this is potentially a good way to land a change in OBS. I'll send you the link in here. I'm not going to deal with this on stream though. It's going to be a bunch of implementation work. Okay, Fontaccini, expose the returned remote capabilities on the client. So tackle 195. Couldn't find a way to get the original new session command response, which contains the WebSocket URL the WebDriver creates for communication. Okay, so this is when Fontaccini connects to a WebDriver host, there's a response back from when you establish a session. That response isn't currently exposed in the client anywhere, but it turns out there's some useful stuff in that response that users of the library might want. It's supposed to be a public getter. Access the remote capabilities. All right, let's look. Oh, what is capabilities here though? Is that a type we own, or is that a type WebDriver owns? Let's create we own, pretty sure. I think we've already abstracted away all of that. Capabilities is a certi JSON, that's fine. Let's see. Okay, so this is when we connect to WebDriver, we do like a handshake to establish a session, which is essentially the same as a browser window. And what we get back from that new session thing, here they want to preserve the capabilities field of that. If capabilities is an object, then we return the new session response here. Okay. Issue map handshake response, capabilities, then we store the remote capabilities. Interesting. I like that. The only question here is, so this extracts the capabilities from the response, but I'm wondering whether there might be other things from that response the user wants as well. So rather than just extracting the capabilities, maybe we should store the entire response. I also forget whether on Fontaccini, yeah, remote, because capabilities is like an overloaded term in WebDriver, because when you connect to WebDriver, you send it these are the capabilities I want, and then it responds with these are the capabilities that I have. And so when currently Fontaccini will refer to these just as capabilities, which is, the right term, but here we want to talk about like this getter to see what the WebDriver host sent us back when we connected, is currently added as a function called remote. Where is it? A function called remote capabilities. But I almost wonder whether it should just be called capabilities rather than remote capabilities, because there are no other capabilities that are relevant here. Like, no one's going to think that if you call .capabilities on a client, it gives you back the capabilities that you sent it when you connected. So I think I'm okay with I think I'm okay with this just being being called capabilities. This just being called abilities, actually. I doubt anyone would expect that this is the capabilities we originally sent to the server. And we can also clarify this in the doc text. What do you think? Seeing this made me wonder, are there other fields of the response outside of capabilities may be relevant? I guess let's see whether the response that we get back whether the response we get back only ever has those fields. Oh, it only ever has session ID and capabilities. Okay, great. That's fine then. So there's nothing else that we expect to ever be added to this. But maybe just maybe more like here, or more like here. So just store and expose the entire new session response rather than only the capabilities. There's not much else in there at the moment, but the session ID may be handy, and who knows if more fields may be added in the future. This is a great addition. Thank you. Left a few questions, but none of them major. Proof. I like to, even if I have like non-blocking comments, I'll usually approve it and then leave the comments. And the reason for that is mostly for myself. When I later come back and look at this PR, I will know that I've already looked at the PR. And so I can sort of reread my own assessment of whether this was generally okay. And we'll approve and run the CI. How do you batch these? It would kind of make sense to me to batch this kind of work by repo. Yeah, so sometimes I'll like look at all of the things for Inferno, for example, but when when I'm doing a big catch up like this, I kind of like to do it by time, because some of these people have been waiting for a long time and I'd rather get to them sooner, rather than prioritizing sort of arbitrarily things for a particular repo. But that's a personal preference. Normally, there aren't enough that I need to batch. And I think it would make sense to do them by repo too, just to keep the sort of cache state. Although for my sake, it doesn't matter too much. I know these projects well enough that I can context switch between them fairly aggressively. I think for the purposes of a stream, it might make more sense because, as you've probably observed by now, I jump around a lot between these different projects, and that's harder for you to keep up with because you don't know these as you haven't been exposed to these as much as I have, and so the jumping is maybe jarring. So it's a good observation. Okay, WebDriver. Unsoundness in safe code from 2022. Closed in 38. Oh, that's great. So this is something that we already fixed in 2022. We just didn't close the issue. Nice. Rocket ship, because it was already fixed. Beautiful. Document cargo features in README. Users who use this crate as a library will very likely want the CLI feature disabled, and it's also not clear to me what the name after feature is for, even after looking at the code. So a section in the README or maybe the root of the crate docs, the list what every feature is and which are enabled by default would be really valuable. I completely agree. I really wish there was a standard way to document features in Cargo / the Rust ecosystem. Feature document. Features in the Cargo Rust ecosystem. There's some discussion in, but no hard guidance as of yet. Maybe you so this person has been a contributor for a while and knows the code base pretty well too. You could take a stab at this after you land 298, 297, 295, 296. Where's the one where they fix it? They have a draft PR 294. Great. Okay. Yeah, I wish this discussion went anywhere, but it did not really. Okay. Release OpenSSH version 10. Yeah. That seems reasonable. I'll do that off stream though. This is basically, at this point, this person is like the main contributor to OpenSSH and the main driver for bringing it forward. And it's unfortunate that they end up bottlenecked on me for doing like new releases and stuff. So what I'll do is I will give them permissions to like run CI and stuff, like basically admin privileges on the repo, and then also give them publish privileges on Crates.io. But I will do that off stream. So I will save this and mark it as run. What's the time? It's basically lunchtime. I think this is a decent place to stop. We caught up 2 weeks ago. That's pretty good. We're at 86 and we started at what, 120 something? So we went through 40 issues. I'm happy. I'm also going to mark this one as done because I see that it has been superseded. Okay. I think that's where we're going to stop for today. What I'll probably do is I'll do another one of these maybe next weekend if I have the time. Like I have to catch up with this backlog anyway, so I might as well do it on stream. Hopefully you found it useful and interesting. And thanks for joining me, and watch out. If you're watching this on recording, there might already be a video that continues from this exact point in time. So thanks, and I'll see you later. And to all of you who are actually here on stream, thank you as always. This is much more fun with you here. Oh, I need to eat. But yeah, this is great. I'm glad that you all like find this useful. It is a little bit weird to be just sort of randomly iterating through all my GitHub notifications with a bunch of people watching, but as long as you find it useful, I'm happy to do it. And the seagull cameo, yeah, there was a lot of that. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming out, and I will see you next time. Have a good weekend.